Koyach first for inviting me down. It's a schus to be Marbit's Torah and Sanazaifen. And we'll start with the Shaila like this. A while ago, a Shaila was presented to me that someone was at home and they had one of their children were playing around and they jumped up onto the kitchen counter. And before anyone realized, they pressed the speed dial button on the phone for Hatzalah. And after a few seconds, the call was connected with the dispatcher. And the mother sitting there with the child on the counter hears the dispatcher say, Hatzalah, Hatzalah, how can we help you? And they were at loss. What should they say? Are they allowed to speak on the phone on Shabbos? What should they do? If they're not going to answer, Hatzalah is going to send down, I guess, standard protocol. If no one answers, you have to assume that there's some type of issue. And they'll send down a few units with a big Chil Shabbos. And the question is it better for them to answer back and tell them there was a false alarm, it was a mistake? Or should they just let things play out and Hatzalah will come and they'll tell them it was a mistake, sorry. This is the Shaila that was presented to me. And the similar Shaila, almost the same exact Shaila, which might have a slight nafkamina la'alacha, is that there are people that have these pendants, people that live alone, especially elderly people, they're nervous that they could fall and they won't be able to get the proper medical help that they need because they're unavailable to get to the phone. And they have a pendant around their neck that with one push of a button, it calls many emergency services. And the question is over here is that by mistake, they pushed the button, they were getting dressed or whatever it is, and they inadvertently pushed the button for the help. And if they're not going to answer back to the dispatcher or the one that mans the phone, they're also going to send down many emergency service to the house. Are they allowed to speak out or not? That was basically the Shaila that was presented. So I saw in the Maramachaimis that the Beis Yosef, the end of Siman Shin Vav, brings down a Shaila Azay. He says, Nishal Rashba, Al Echad Shesholchloi B'Shabbos Shetziu Bita B'Chazaka Yibesai that basically the shaila is that a girl, someone's going to be taken, that they're not going to be able to be a shomer Torah mitzvahs anymore. They're going to be, shmad. And the question is, are you allowed to go ahead and do malacha on Shabbos to save them? So that's the shaila that the Rashba brings down. So the Rashba says, he answers, Mekomakim kain daiti noita she'ein doichin Shabbos al Hatzalah ma'averis. Lefi she'amru ein oivim l'adam amoid v'chatoi b'shvil she'yizka chavercha. Afilu isa zuta lo yishrin alei k'dei lahatzel mechaveroi isura rabba. That means you can't go ahead and do an avera to save someone else from doing an Aveira. It means you have the girl over here that if she's going to stay where she is, she's going to be over on many Aveiras. And now you want to make a cheshbon and you want to go ahead and you'll do one Chil Shabbos to go ahead and save her from being nichshol for many times. So Zok the Rashba, the Ad Kan Le'yaminam Perakol Ma'arvin, Nichle L'chaver Levet Isura Zuta, Kehechel Levet Amoritz Isura Rabba. The Yesida is a Gemara in Ervin that you're allowed to do an Isura Zuta to save someone from being a Rabba. That the Isser came to the Amaretz Aydei the Chaver. That means the Chaver was involved in setting up the Amaretz to be over the Isser. So now, if you're involved in setting it up, so then there's a reason to say that you could do an Aveira Zuta to save someone else from being Nichshel. Av binyan acher loik much perakam the Shabbos, but by the Hidbik Pas Betanur, you're not allowed to go take off the Pas Betanur over there, even though person's going to be over an Issa Diraisa by the past staying there, the Yanala be over an Issa Zuta to save someone else from being over an Issa Rabbah. So the same thing over here with this case of the girl that was taken Lishmad, Yanala to be over an Issa to save her. And we could relate that to this our case over here. It would be a similar type of thing, that just because someone pushed the button for Hatzalah, and now Hatzalah is going to be over in Issa Rabbah, they're going to be over on many Surei Shabbos, and there's going to be a lot of Chil Shabbos. Now you want to go ahead and do an Issa Zuta you want to do one Chil Shabbos, or could be speaking the phone is only a Rabbanon, and you want to do that to save them from being over. So according to Rashba, you're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to go ahead and be over an Isser. You could say, by the case of the pendant, that the person themselves pressed the button, not it was a child. So over there, Yesh Laden, maybe according to Rashba, that the Isser came al Yidei the Chaver. The same way over there, the Chaver was the one that set up for the Amaretz to be over. So over here also, the Isser came through your mistake, or what you're doing, your Maisa, your action was the one that caused it to be over. Yesh Laden Lufi the Rashba, that it could be that you would be able to. But in the case that it wasn't you, it was the child that got up on the counter and pushed the button. So in such a case, the Issa did not come through you, so you'll not be able to stop Hatzalah. You won't be able to do any malacha to stop Hatzalah from doing this. That's the Rashba Shita. Beis Yosef brings weiter. Beis Yosef brings down another Shita Srishayim. Brings down Taisvis. Says Taisvis kostu perakam the Shabbos b'tchila kedivrei Rashba. So brings down Taisvis says the same thing. Taisvis says if you cautious on this, and Taisvis fears ice. He brings down. The dafka heicha shapasha shehibik pas betamra samach hashecha. Ava heicha deloy pasha midi. That means the person that was doing the Ma'aseh Chol Shabbos wasn't pesheya. Shari lamevedi surazuta ki heichi lavid chavri isarabba. That means you're allowed to. They're not like the Rashba, but you're allowed to be over an isazuta to save someone from being over an isur rabba. But this is only if the person that's doing the Ma'aseh Isser is not came through a pshia. So now a case, it's Bashar Azai that Hatzalah wasn't Pasheya. They did everything they were supposed to do. They got a call, there was, they followed a protocol and they would come. So l'chayr l'fi Taisvis, you would be able to do an Isazuta to save them from Nisur Rabba. Taisvis brings a raya from different Gemaras, and that's how Taisvis comes out, that you could do an Isser if someone wants to pay, if there's a Hashem Trutza, the Mitzvah Rabba, Hadav Barish, Enoch Mitzvah Rabba, Matzil Shleif Kedua, Ash the Shamed. That means this is a Mitzvah Rabba to save someone from being Mishmad. And Trutza Mechal Ben Pasha, Lei Pasha, Hachanami Lei Pasha, the Hilchos Chalosh, Ales, Shabbos, Akeach Teleshari. It's a Mitzvah Namika. So Taisus fears ice that you're allowed to do this, you're allowed to be Mechal Shabbos to save someone. So L'chaira, in our case, would be the same exact thing. That Lafi Taisvis would be Machlekes Taisvis in the Rashba if you're allowed to do this. Lafi the Rashba, you would not be able to Mechal Shabbos. And Lafi Taisvis, you would be able to Mechal Shabbos to save Hatzalah from being over the Isser. So it's Machlekes Rishayim. So now we have Machlekes Rishayim. The Shaila is, where do we go from there? What's the halacha l'maisa? How do you paskin negedis Machlekes Rishayim? So we take a step right till you go to Shulchan Aruch. And the Shulchan Aruch in Siman Shin Vav Sif Yadalit. Shulchan Aruch says, Misha shoch leitzia bitay mi beisay b'Shabbos leitzia nichlal Yisrael mitzlasam derech pam l'shtadl mitzlasam v'yetza afil chutz l'shalosh parsayis v'loy boy bezdin goyzenlov, that you're allowed to do it. So Taisvis, the Mechaber is paskening like the Taisvis, and that's the Beragoyl over on the side says that it's Taisvis. The Lefi Taisvis, you're allowed to go ahead and do a Chil Shabbos to save someone from being over a bigger Chil Shabbos. So in the case over here, it's a bigger Shabbos. In the case of Shulchan Aruch, has many Shabbosis. And in any case, that the Darg of the Isser Chil Shabbos should be a higher. You do this the Drabanan to save someone from doing this the Deraisa. So you're allowed to do that. So l'chayra, the halacha l'fi the Mechaber would be that you're allowed to do that. The Mishnah Berurah says the same thing. The Mishnah Berurah in Nun Vav, the Mishnah Berurah brings down in the middle. He says, because he's going with Taisvis. So if he Taisvis, it has to be wearing Pesheya. So it has to be Ba'inus. But if there's not a Pesheya, so then you mechuyev to lasis Isura Zuta that Chavera should not do an Isra Rabba. So Chayra, you have a regular Sak Halacha if he Taisvis, and if he Taisvis, it should be Mutter. Mishmur if you're on Pasha, so then Yitaka don't have Taisis. That means if there's a Pshia involved, then Taisis' Mahalach doesn't get involved. And L'chaira, if there was a Pshia, then it would be Asr. Now the issue is that that's very good, the Mechaber. There's a few more words in the Mechaber in parentheses. It says, V'ayin l'kamon, Siman Shin Chav Ches, Sif Yud. So over there, The shaila is, what does it say over there? So if you look in Siman Shin Chav Ches, Sif Yud, so it's at the end of the Sif. It's the Rama over there. It says, Misha writes him la'ainsai shiava avera gedayla ein mechal of haShabbos kedei latzila. That if someone is an einus, that someone's going to be over an avera gedayla, chil Shabbos, or other avera ein mechal of haShabbos kedei latzila. You're not allowed to be mechal Shabbos kedei latzila. And who's the maramakim for this halacha? So it says in parentheses, they say Shem Rashba. So it seems like it's not over 100% clear how we're passing over here. In the end of Shin Vav, the Mechaber is passing like Taisus. Over here, the Ramah is bringing down that you're not Mechal Shabbos, and the Maramakim for this halacha is they say Shem Rashba. So it seems like they're going with the Rashba's mahalach that you can't be Mechal Shabbos to save someone from doing an issur. So it should come out. We'll go with regular klolei psak. It's machlokes mechaber amos. It should somehow go with the ones that pass like the mechaber. Svardim they go like the mechaber. So they have the mechaber's psak. If you go like the Ramah, it's machlokes mechaber amos. So the chayre should come out lefi Ramah that you're not mechal Shabbos. So back to our case of the shayla of chil Shabbos. So the chayre should be totally in a machlokes mechaber amos. So you have a regular machlokes mechaber Ramah. So you go with the Ramah. So Maisa, you should not be it shouldn't be mutter to mechal Shabbos to save her, because you're not allowed to do an avera to save someone from avera this avera. So the same thing that's all. If you're Ramah, you should let everything fall in its place. Let whatever happens happens, and you should not be able to mechal Shabbos. So that should come out. Should be the halacha. Now the Mishnah Berurah and many other achronim seem to be bothered by this, and the Mishnah Berurah back in Siman Shin Vav on that sif over there, the Mishnah Berurah in Sif Katan Nun Ches seems to be bothered by this ha'ara. So the Mishnah Berurah over there in Sif Nun Ches says, "V'ayin lakamon Siman Shin Chav Ches Sif Yud." So what does it say over there? Ba'aga. So he brings down. Look in the Ramah over there. The Yisasham, the Misha writes him la'ainsai shiava avera gedayla ein l'chal Shabbos le'atzilai. So l'chayra it should be a problem. The ein steer lakan. It's not a steer. The Hasamayri Sharitzim Lainsai Shiava Avera Pam Echad. Over there, it's not Avera Rabbah. It's a one-time deal. Lahachi, I feel me Avera Gedayla, going Lavid Avoidis Gilim, Ein Sarach Shabbos Kei Latzilan. The Mechal Shabbos Gamkein, Ka'ovid Avoidis Gilim. That over there, it's a trade-off. Over there, you have one Isser, and the Isser to do to save that Isser is Shava B'Shava. That means Mechal Shabbos Ka'ovid Gilulim, Mishmur says is similar. So you can't be over on Chil Shabbos to save someone from that. Mash'en ken kan shetisher mumeres b'techal Shabbos la'olam. Over here, someone's going to stay a mummer, and it's not going to be a one-time deal. It's going to be over this for many, many, many Shabbos. So if you have to weigh the two isurim that have to be done over here, if you're going to leave her staying where she is, she's going to be over on many, many, many isurim, which is going to be much more of a davar chamor than one Chil Shabbos. So Mela. Over here also it stems with Taisus' mahalach that if you have to look at the two isurim, if it's an isura zuta, it's a shvacher isur. So enachanami you do it. If it's shava b'shava, so shava taisa. You should do this avera to save someone else from doing another avera. So that's how the Mishnah Berurah is miyashiv this dira. And the same thing will be even in one Chil Shabbos l'chayra. If there's different dargas in the Chil Shabbos, that means there's an isur Chil Shabbos diraisa, it's a Chil Shabbos drabanan. So l'chayra, you do the Issa drabanan to save from Issa diraisa. So back to the case of the Hatzalah, the same type of thing. That l'chayra speaking into the phone to cancel Hatzalah is at most an Issa drabanan, and driving the car, especially if there's numerous multiple members of Hatzalah that are going to come, it's going to be many surei diraisa and so many surim. Of every time you press the gas pedal is many isurim. So the l'chayra should come out of cheshbon. That's not such a stira. According to everyone, you should be able to cancel that tzala, because canceling that tzala is a shvacher isser. It's only an isser drabanan, and you're saving them from being over isser diraisa. Or many people being over isser diraisa, and l'chayra should come out l'fi had mishru's miyashav sai l'fi the mechaber sai l'fi the Ramah. Everything should stem, and you should be able to cancel that all. Now, Derech Agav, there is a nidin in the, not called Heinting Paiskim, but a few years ago about talking on the telephone on Shabbos if the chalal is an Isser. And I think they bring down from Shlomo Zalman that once the connection is established, just to speak on the phone is not even Isser. And that's why he speaks out that if someone has to make a phone call for Chil Shabbos, you don't have to count your words, exactly how many words you have to say. He says you could say hello. You don't have to be concerned that every word that you're going to say, you might be over in a Chil Shabbos because it's not needed for the Chaylim. That once the connection is established, so there's no more current or whatever, however the connection of the phone works, nothing's being moisif by speaking more words. The connection is made already. And Mamela, will feel that anyway, speaking on the phone might not be an Isser. There are many that say, and this is really a technical question, that today the way that phones work is not the same thing. It's much more digital. And I believe there's many poskim that say that today it's not, the Metzias is not like that. And every time you speak into the phone, it's taka causing different circuits, a different electricity, and it's an Isser. It's not Isser D'Iraisa l'chayra, but an Isser Rabbanon will be to speak different words into the telephone. So l'chayra, that's what we have over here, Negei the Shaila. And l'chayra should be mutter. So l'chayra, that should be the psak. So Zazoi, they bring down from Shlomo Zalman, the Nishmas Avram in Siman Shin Lamed Ches brings down this similar type of Shaila. And he says, not so pashut, that it's not so pashut to call Hatzalah and tell them to cancel. Why is it not so pashut? So he says that if you look in Shulchan Aruch, Negeya, the chayla about if someone did a malacha and the malacha wasn't done. The case is that a chayla needed something and now the chayla does not need it anymore. So in Shulchan Aruch and Sif Tezvav and Shin Chaches brings down the case. Amdu a roifim shetzarach greigris achas, v'rotzu asar. Ve'evi lekolach a greigris. That means the chayla needed one greigris, one shear, a certain amount of food, needed one slice of bread. Ve'evi lekolach a greigris. Everyone running to their houses, and everyone came with their slice of bread. They carried, they did itzah, whatever malacha had to be done, and everyone brought them a greigris. Kulam pturim. Everyone's potter because they were all doing it in good faith. They planned to do it to help the chayla. Yeshem sachar toiv. Me'ez Hashem, afilu hivri b'rishayna. They all have schar, even if they were hivri b'rishayna, even though the first one, by the time they came, was already done already. By the time they pulled in with their bread, the chayil already ate, and he already was nitzrap already. Doesn't make a difference. They all get seicha toiv, schar toiv. And it's really a Gemara. It's a Gemara Menachos. Amar Rabba, Gemara Menachos Samach Daled Amar Aleph, Amar Rabba, Chayla Shamdu L'Greigus Achas, V'rotzu Asar B'nei Adam, V'aviu Asar Greigus B'as Achas, P'turin, V'afilu B'zachazeh, Afilu Kaidim V'hivri B'shayna, everyone is potter. And the reason is, everyone's potter, and Rashi over there says, Afilu B'zachazeh, the Kulon L'mitzvah Niskavnu, Turin, the Azaras L'chayil Meshubach, that everyone that's Azaras L'chayil is Meshubach, and it's a mitzvah, and everyone gets grace schar for doing this mitzvah. So now, Zakir Shlomo Zalman, so someone that does something for Hatzalos Nefashis, even though it comes out that their Hatzalos Nefashis was not needed, because while they were doing their Hatzalos Nefashis, the chayla wasn't a chayla anymore, he was ready in Nisrapa. It's not considered that he was doing a Ma'aseh Aveira. He says he even gets schar for it. Rishos Avram quotes over there Shlomo Zalman, Shemekivon Sha'isa Roif Mechal Shabbos Beheter. He was allowed to be Mechal Shabbos. A Kavanosai Lahat Solas Nefesh. Yekabel Schara Min Hashmayim. You get schar. V'asa Lavel Shemavera Afilu Shvus Rabbanon Kedei Shulo Yav Kami Suratayra. And someone else is now allowed to even be over in Issad Rabbanon to save this Roife from being in Issad Torah because it's not Issad Torah. Ki Einu Oisa Sham Isser Ki Kavanosai La Mitzvah Gdoilo Shalat Solas Nefesh. And that's how he learns the Shulchan Aruch, that Shulchan Aruch says, Yesh lem schar toiv me'es Hashem, that its snapshot is that they didn't do anything, that it's just a schar toiv for a nice machshava. The Chayri is learning that they have schar toiv me'es Hashem because they were doing a mitzvah. And this ma'isa that they were doing is considered a ma'isa mitzvah, and Mela to get schar. So it should come out to back to our case. someone that calls Hatzalah, and Hatzalah is coming to save someone. It's not pshat is that they're doing a mitzvah, an avera b'shoigeg, a ba'inus, whatever it is. It's not an avera at all. All it is a mitzvah. It's a pashta mitzvah of Hatzalah nefashis. Elamai, it's not needed. That's nunu. That's not your cheshbon. You're planning to do a mitzvah. That's considered a mitzvah of Hatzalah nefashis. The other Rishonim, not everyone learns like this. The Mishnah Berurah over there learns in Mishnah Berurah Mem Beis on that sif Pirish Sheviloi Bezach Hazeh the Kvar Ochel Masheheviloi Rishon Hibri Afil Hachi Kulam Ptur Mechakos. Why? Mishum the Kol Echad Chashuv Shu Yagdim V'loi Levad Shepturim El Yeshem Gam Schar Toiv Avur Machshavtam Atoiva, that they have Schar Toiv not because they did a mitzvah. It sounds like the Mishnah Berurah. The Mishnah Berurah sounds like that it's Machshavtam Atoiva. They get Schar because they meant to do good. Could be it's an Einus, and an Einus they don't get Avera, but it's still considered a Maisa Chol Shabbos. But they get Schar not because what they were doing was considered a Maisa mitzvah. That's all stuff. It's not a mitzvah mamish. Pshat is, it's a good machshava. It's an Einus with a good machshava, so you get Schar for doing something that you meant well. So you get Schar. But not Pshat is that the Maisa you're doing was a Maisa at all stuff. It seems like Rosh Zalman and others bring down from Eliashiv. Learn not like mamish this diuk in the Mishnah Berurah. They learn that pshat is that it's a ma'isa mitzvah. When someone does atzol stefashis and Shabbos, they're doing atzol stefashis. That's a ma'isa mitzvah atzol stefashis. Elamai, it's not needed, so it wasn't needed. But if you're trying to do atzol stefashis, that's considered a ma'isa of atzol stefashis. That's what you were planning to do, and that's the machshava was. Even though at the end of the day it wasn't needed, it's considered that your ma'isa you done was a ma'isa that was doing for sakonis for atzol stefashis. It was a ma'isa that was done for Hatzalas Nefashis, you get schar. And if you get schar, it's considered a ma'isa mitzvah. So it's pashut that you don't say that someone else should do an avera to stop you from doing it. It's not an avera, it's a mitzvah. Even according to the Mishnah Berurah that it's an einus, or it's you get schar from machshavtam atayva, it's a machshav atayva. You could also say the negeh dizach of doing a mitzvah to save someone else from an avera. Could be it's not mamish such an avera that you could do an avera to stop someone from being over that, because it's not an avera. It's a ma'isa avera, or it's a ma'isa of Chol Shabbos, but it had the good machshav in it, and mela it's going to be mutter. So l'chayra, this is shat in the Shom Zalman of Eliashiv, and according to both of them, you will not be able to cancel Hatzalah because Hatzalah has a heter for doing this. Once Hatzalah has a heter for doing this, so Mela, there's no din of Chatei B'Shul Shetiska Chavercha because he's not doing a Maisa Aver. L'chayra, that's pshat over here. So back to our Shaila. L'chayra, we should back now to the other way that you're not allowed to do Chil Shabbos to save someone from being over. Now the Arizh Azoi, that's very good in the whole cheshbon of this new musik of Chatei B'Shvil Shetiska Chavercha. Now, there's a whole nother shayla over here. Then always in Chil Shabbos, we say a kal tchila. The pshat is that whenever you have a choice of what things to do, you always try to get away with the least isser. If someone himself has to do a Chil Shabbos, whatever the malach is, if someone has to get to the hospital and there's a way that you could do an Issa Rabbanan and get the same result, or an Issa Diraisa and also get the same result, you do it Issa Rabbanan. So always trying to get the least isurim that be over in order to get to the desired result. So the desired result is to save the chayla. We're talking about Chil Shabbos for a chayla. So the end result is that the chayla should be saved. And Chil Shabbos is mutter to save the chayla. So if you have to decide what to do, so always try to do the most kaldik isser. So over here also the same thing. The Chil Shabbos over here, that's all the fashas, is to save whatever the chayla. So now whenever you have to save a chayla, so always try to get away with the least Chil Shabbos. So over here also, if the least Chil Shabbos would be canceling Hatzalah, so the chayla, you should have a cheshbon that you should do the least Chil Shabbos, Hatzakala Kal Tchila, you should go ahead and cancel Hatzalah because you're being over less of an isser to get to whatever Hatzalah the fashas that we're trying to do. So there's a Gemara in Yuma, Pei Gimel and Aleph. The Gemara says, Tan Rabbanan, Misha Alzei Bulmis. someone that has a bulmus, whatever this condition is of a bulmus, you always try to give the lesser of the isser. So the Gemara has different choices of different isurim and goes through different cases. What's considered the kal akal? So the Gemara says tevel nevela. If there's choice of tevel and nevela, machil neisin nevela. Tevel shvius. If there's tevel and shvius, tevel truma. If there's tevel and truma tanoi. So if someone has tevel and truma, so now it's not clear which one is considered the chamor and which one's considered the kal. So the Gemara says machlekes tanoim the sanya. Machil neisin tevel. Ve'imachil neisin truma. Bentei moima truma v'loi tevel. So it seems to be a machlekes over here in the Gemara. Which one is more chamor? Is the more chamor going to be the tevel, or is the more chamor going to be the truma? So the shaila is that you have to give the chayla one of them, and now you don't know which one. Which one's the more kal? So it's machlekes. What's considered the more kal? Is the tevel more kal, or is the truma more kal? Now it'll be the shaila what to do. So. And that's the shaila. So the Parashas Drachim in Drush Tisha Asar has ha'ara azay. It's a very interesting ha'ara. He says over there, "Ulafi pir zesha kasavna l'das haran nichli koshi acheres shnizgashti b'sugizu." That he says the miyashev akasha they have in the sugya. The man nechel gu avas ha'olam machin lo'isei tevel l'truma. The Gemara has the machlekes. If you give him tevel l'truma, the mar savar tevel chamur, the mar savar truma chamura. So the shaila, which one to give, which isser is going to be more kal? So he says he has a pashta hara. Lomalei nasa tikkun acher. Do something else. You're not some isser tevel, isser truma. I have a different eitzah that I could get off both isurim. I'm worried about a kal. I have an eitzah to get rid of both isurim. What's that eitzah? V'hu she is sakan a tevel v'yafresh truma. Go ahead and be masakan the tevel and be mafresh truma. V'yarze v'yarev oisem machutz. You have, let's say, a thing of vegetables, whatever the case was, and now it's tevel and truma. So take off the truma from the tevel, and now make the tevel mesukin. But you have also the truma, and mix it in together. Obviously, you need to eat the whole thing. So the yarvay the hashta leka iser tayra. There's no iser diraisa because there's no more tevel. The tevel is mutter. Because it's already it's mesukin. You talk of the trumas. It's not tevel anymore. Elamai eating truma also. There's bittul. You mavatal the truma. Behold, there's a din bittul, and he says that it's I'm in a Torah chai betray bottle. You'll see HaRav lahatos. Umagam b'mim minoi. So it's mutter. So now you don't have an issa truma. You don't have a tevel. So l'chayr gvaldig eitza. L'chayr no isur. Yichit heima elamai. You're going to tie it to me. Mishum de'em vatal is l'chatchila. There's a din of aim of antlan sachatchila. You're not allowed to go ahead and do bittul. Ze'ena ma'ila rucha cloud. The loyim by the source. Akasu yishayin v'achreim the islahu the iser zed the aim of antlan sachatchila m'drabanan dafka. If you learn that aim of antlan is only isad drabanan, the pshita demuta shiaver isad drabanan v'leyaver isad teretz. It's pashit. You have a choice over here to be over an isad drabanan of antlan isad chila, or be over an isad diraisa of eating truma tevel. So it's pasha to kal akal. Yizucha over on the isra rabbanon of vatlan isra chila. El af leman to amar the hard aim of vatlan isra chilum diraisa. V'yalf mizrei b'sheila mekol mokim shita deina l'sura ba'alma. If you lav leka, it's zicher nowhere near the darga of truma tevel. It means in the chaymer isser, it's not going to be anywhere close to an isser of tevel or truma. And Mela in Kain Mutav Shanaver is said the aim of Atlanisser Shaina Surab Alma Mashiavra Chayla is the Shu B'Misa De Shemai. So the Kitzer, that's his ha'ara that he has. And l'chayr it's Gavaldik ha'ara. So Zok there, if you skip down a few lines, he says in the next paragraph, 2 paragraphs over, he says Yira this really Rashi the Kol Issa Shanaslu Tzarech Chayla going Tevel Truma the Achilas Tevel Trumu Tzarech Chayla Chain Lishkat L'Chayla L'Achila Nevela. That means these isurim are needed to save the chayla. The chayla needs to eat these things. In order for him to eat these things, he's going to have to be over that isur. So mela, that isur is nitcha. So then you start measuring which isur the chayla should be over. This isser of ein mevatlin has nothing to do with the chayla. The chayla doesn't know anything about it. It doesn't help him. He's not being over on that isser. It has absolutely nothing to do with the chayla. Mr. Chamer, Kamakin Kivan Shein by Tsar Chayla, Nitin Isser Zeli Dachis. Afshu Isser Kal. Umutiv Shiaver Chayla Isser Chamer, Kivan Shu Tsar Chayla, Mashanaver Isser Kal, Kivan Isser Zein by Tsar Chayla. And he says, as like, there's no din of a Kal Tchila, and there's no heter to Machal Shabbos, to be over an Isser, if this Isser is not needed for the Chayla. It means, in order to save the Chayla, this Isser is Leimayel V'Leimayel. All this Isser is doing is to save the Chayla from being over a different Isser. The Chayla has a heter to eat, and he's not going to be over either Isser Truma or Isser Tevel. So you want to come along and you want to say, I have a different way. I could get the Chayla out of being over any one of those Isurim by me or someone else, or even the Chayla himself being over an Isser Rabban and Emavat. That's not a cheshbon. Isurim anitcha because of Sakonis Nefashis. And Sakonis Nefashis needs you to eat Truma. Sakonis Nefashis needs you to eat Tevel, one of the two. But Sakonis Nefashis doesn't need Ein Mevatlin Isser. Ein Mevatlin Isser is just to save you from being over a different Isser. It's to save you from being over a different Isser. There's no din, Chil Shabbos, Negeya, that. So this is a Yisoid from the Parashas Drachim. So any time that you have a situation of a Chayla that has a heter for Chil Shabbos for a Chayla, you're allowed to do malachas that the Chayla should get better, or to save the Chayla from whatever situation he's in. Now you want to go ahead and do a malacha to save Chil Shabbos. You want to do a malacha to save other Yisurim. That's not mutter. There's no heter to do malacha to save you from another Isur. And the Chayra, this is a Yisoid. Many Poskim, I believe Yashav went with this Parashas Drachim. The others that went with this Parashas Drachim. And Mamela comes out back to our cases the case that we handled over here. So in the case of the Hatzalah, so now let's go through what's happening. Going through what's happening is that you're calling Hatzalah was my mistake. And now Hatzalah is coming. Hatzalah has a heter of Sakonis Nefashis. Let it be a mitzvah ka'avid, not a mitzvah ka'avid, however you want to learn, not involved that whole sugya of if they're doing a ma'aseh mitzvah or not. But they're allowed to do this for Hatzalah Nefashis. They're allowed to come. Now you want to go ahead and be over an Issur Rabbanon, whatever Issur Rabbanon of electricity are called, to save them from being over on that Issur. There's no heter for you on Shabbos to do that. They have a heter to do their ma'aseh Issur. You don't have any heter to go ahead and save them from being over an Issur Shabbos. It should come out that there's no heter whatsoever to cancel that salah, and there's nothing to do about it. You're not allowed to go ahead and do a malacha to save someone else from being over a malacha that they're allowed to do. So this comes out these days. There's a few other cases that we could talk about and see if we could say a similar aside, and it'll come out. No halacha l'maisa mamish, but what to talk about in these cases. In cases, the scenario that happens over here in Lakewood often is that there's a lot of children, and children fall. They break their arms, their legs, dislocated elbows. All different types of things could happen on Shabbos. Now, there's different levels of what medical care is needed for different scenarios. If someone has a bad break, they have to go to a better hospital. It's a small little thing, they go to a Shracher hospital. Hakol feed a matziv of what is needed to help the injury. Now, many times someone could call Hatzalah. Hatzalah comes to someone's house, and they're not sure. They're mesupik about how bad is this break, or how bad is this location. Does this need to go, let's say here in Lakewood, to go further away to Philadelphia to CHOP, or this could be taken care of in a local hospital? They don't know. Pashta Suffolk, that's all doesn't know. So based on the Klolim in Hilchos Shabbos, especially if the shaila is of Sakonis Nefashis, a bad bone break or a dislocation, could be a shaila Sakonis Nefashis. So mitzad Suffolk, Sakonis Nefashis, you're allowed to go to wherever is needed to take care of the Suffolk. So if you're not sure, the halacha would be is that you're allowed to go to the further hospital. You're allowed to go take care of it, because that's the cloud. That if you have a Suffolk of Sakonis Nefashis, it's allowed to be Mechal Shabbos. So now there's another eitzah. There's another eitzah that someone comes up with. That why go straight to the hospital? There's a mumcha, there's a pediatrician, there's a doctor. Here we have a Dr. Shanik. You go to Dr. Shanik's house and let him take a look at it. And he'll decide he's a bigger mumcha, he's a größer mumcha, Baki. and he'll decide which hospital they should take them to. Should they take them to the further hospital, take them to the closer hospital? So it should be a gewaldige Eitzah, save from the whole trip, the whole ganze long trip and the ganze Chil Shabbos. You could save it. They'll tell you to go to the closer hospital. Mela, you'll save a lot of Chil Shabbos that wasn't necessary. So the this will be the same shmuz, that right now you have a heter to go to the further hospital at Suffolk, Sakonis Nefesh. You have a heter. It's a Maisa heter gomer. Suffolk Pikuach Nefesh. You'll have to go to the hospital. Now you want to go ahead and you want to drive your ambulance a few blocks. Why are you driving? You're driving to save yourself that later on I'll avoid Chil Shabbos. The Chayla is not getting any better or worse by you making that drive. That's absolutely doing nothing to help the Chayla. All that's doing is to save Chil Shabbos, to save time. So the Chayla, if this shmuz, will be the same thing. You're not allowed to do that to go ahead. That's not saving anything Negea Chil Shabbos. Negea Sakonis Nefashos. All that's doing is saving Malacha. And there's no heter to do Chil Shabbos to save someone from Malacha. And a similar type of Shaila, every once in a while you hear such a Shaila that someone gets a call, they know they have a elderly chayes or a sick relative that's in the hospital, and they weren't able to be there for Shabbos. And they get a call on Shabbos that the situation deteriorated, and maybe you should come over because it might be a decision to make, or something has to get done, or being there might help out the situation. And the question is, you let it go on Shabbos. So they get such a message, they went shul, they called the house, they left a message on the machine that the situation is serious, and maybe come over. By the time he got the message, it was a half an hour later. Comes home, and now he's not sure. Should I go? Maybe it's too late. By the time I get there, or by the time I leave, it's already not negay anymore. Person was ready to nifter. So the question is, are you allowed to call back the hospital and find out, is it still relevant for me to come? So why should I go ahead now, Michal Shabbos, a car with this, with that, phone calls, schlepping all the way to the hospital on Shabbos? Maybe it's not again anymore. Make one phone call and save yourself a Veltut Chil Shabbos basket. So it'll be the same thing. That you're not allowed to do such a thing because that phone call has nothing to do with the Chayla. Right now, you have a heter to go because it's a suffix. Maybe they need you there. And if you needed Sakonis Nefashos, you'll have to go. So to go ahead and make the phone call, that will be a Maisa of Chil Shabbos, nothing to do to help the Chayla. So these are two cases that you could apply this Yisait. There's one more case, very interesting, HaRav, which see if this mamash applies to this case. So it's like every once in a while you hear these major stories about a person went missing. Happens every once in a while, every few years, you hear this big story, a person went missing. Either a child went missing, or an elderly person that also wandered away and they're lost. And they mobilize all different emergency services, Hatzalah, Shoimrim, Mechlesuas, all different types of organizations get involved, and they go on a search, find the person. Be lost in the forest, lost in the city, all different cases. They go on a major search, and everyone's looking, and they have hundreds of volunteers. Everyone's going all over the place trying to find the missing person. And sometimes it happens on Shabbos, which is involved in many, it's a big Chil Shabbos, and with they make loudspeakers, announcing it. Everyone found the person. And they're going around and around and around. And they split up into groups, and every group has their area that they're searching for this person. And it's late Friday night, and there's a group of a few people, and they're looking and looking and looking, and they got it. They found him. And they found the person. Baruch Hashem, he's all right. They found him. Now, the question is, what are they allowed to do? Are they allowed to now go ahead and call into the main base, the central station, and tell them, we found the person that's missing? What do they gain by doing that? Is that the whole search, everyone's being Michal Shabbos and all the Tircha and everything like that, will be saved. Because now they found the person. There's no point in searching anymore. It's found. Or no, maybe you can't do that. You have to just keep quiet. Or maybe you got a guy to do it. Because right now, there's no more sakana. The sakana is over. Elamai, you want to now go ahead and call into the base to save everyone else from being over on Chil Shabbos. You're doing a malacha to save other people from a Chil Shabbos that they're allowed to do. They're allowed to go and search because they're doing machshava tova. They're doing a ma'aseh heter. Elamai, you want to stop them because it's not needed anymore. It's not needed. You're not allowed to do malacha to do that. If you have a way to do it without a malacha, got a guy, So the chayr will be mutter to do. But to go ahead and call in or do some type of malacha to stop them from being over on Chil Shabbos, the chayr l'fidus yisoid would be the same thing. Now, just on a practical level, each case could be different, and many could argue with a svara that if people are going to go searching, especially a whole Friday night, knowing that even if the person's found, they're not going to be told to stop, and they're going to go through the whole night searching and searching and searching and for nothing. If it happens again, I don't know if they're going to sign up so fast, because no one wants to do this for no reason. So you have to be shaykel. That could be there's the same heter of Seif and Shlom Chilason, that you're allowed to go ahead and do this malacha to save people from being over an isser, to help people that they're going to do this again. The same heter for a doctor or other people to come back from the hospital. If you're not going to let them do this, people aren't going to come again and do it, and maybe it'll be a heter. So these are different cases we could apply this yisoid, that the heter of Chil Shabbos is only to save someone from doing an actual, malach that has to do with the, something to do with the Chil Shabbos, but just to go ahead and save someone from doing a malacha, that is not going to be mutter. So that's one topic we want to speak about. I just want to have a aura too, a different case of Chil Shabbos or malachas that you're allowed to do on Shabbos for a chayla. Now the halacha is that a woman that's a miyaledes is a chayla, and you're allowed to be mechal Shabbos for a miyaledes. And today, someone's wife is in labor, they're allowed to go to the hospital on Shabbos to have a baby, because having a baby at home is a sakana if you're not prepared for it. And you're allowed to go ahead to go to the hospital on Shabbos. Now, the question is, how much of an expense do you have to go to save yourself from different levels of Chil Shabbos and going to the hospital? And many Achronim bring down from Rishonim that a Yeledes is not a major sakana, especially before she gives birth. And if you could do it with a guy, you should do a malacha with a guy, and you should not do a malacha with Yisrael if it's possible to do the malacha with a guy. And that's why the minig makubal is that if a woman has to go into the hospital on Shabbos to give birth, you don't drive yourself. You try to get a guy to drive to the hospital. Now the question is, Azoy, if someone had that, his wife went into labor, and he needed to get to the hospital, and he called some type of taxi service to come take him to the hospital, and it looks like there was some type of mix-up. And the taxi comes, it wasn't just a regular taxi. They sent a stretch limousine or some other very expensive taxi, and it's going to cost him to go to the hospital for this trip, which usually would cost him $50. They want $750 for this trip. And time is of essence. He has no time to cancel this and tell them that send me a regular car. This is what it is. It's either $750 for this stretch limousine or drive yourself. So the question is, how much, or what's the level of how much money someone has to pay to avoid being mechal Shabbos himself and go with a guy, or anything beyond a certain amount. So now this din that you have to use a guy doesn't apply. And it could be not only in this, interesting case, it'd be a case that someone, let's say a case in Lakewood, that someone for whatever reason has to go give birth in Manhattan or in Philadelphia, and it's a lot of money. Today, they charge for taxi to get there, it could be $250, and especially if you don't drive yourself, then there's a return trip also that somehow you have to get back, and it could end up being hundreds of dollars to use a guy to take you to the hospital. And the shaila is, are you mechuyev to do that or not? Like how much does someone have to spend not to get a guy, not to do it himself? So I brought down two different svaras from different svarim about this thing. The Sefer Mishnah's Pikuach Nefesh, he brings down this shaila from, he asked Reb Chaim Kanievsky this shaila, how much do you have to spend? And Reb Chaim said, Tircha v'eitzos mammon have a kedichui v'eicher. That eitzos mammon is also considered something that's considered dichui v'eicher, that you don't have to do eitzos mammon to use ayidei goy. But the shaila is, how much eitzos mammon? So it sounds like they asked Reb Chaim, what's the hagdara Reb Chaim said, "Zeh mistavish yaseid goy. V'ma goy mevakish mechir mugzam, yitachin she'ein chayiv v'ashir tzarachin." That if the guy is asking for davar mugzam, that means much more than the regular amount, you don't have to spend that to save yourself from being over an isser. So he doesn't explain it. He says v'ashir tzarachin. I thought that's something that someone usually would spend for such a thing. That means if it's something that normally someone would not spend for such a service, it's not something that someone would spend money for. For example, someone that has to go to Manhattan or someone has to go to Philadelphia, if this person would not spend during the week $250 to do this, if he has to go, he'll get a bus, he'll get a friend to drive him, he'll figure something out. He's not spending that much money for that trip to the hospital. This is beyond what he feels is normal to spend for such a trip. And it's like no one's going to take a taxi from New York to Los Angeles, It's not something that's done. You have to get there, you'll figure out some other way, but you're not going to take a taxi. So anything that's beyond someone's hasagas of what they think is normal to spend for a trip, l'chayra, that's not something that you have to do. And l'chayra, you could drive yourself. You don't have to have a guy. I saw Moshe Sternbach in the Tshuvas on Hagis in Chelik Vav. Simon Peites also brings down this, and he doesn't like this. He says that it's nothing to do with usual, and he goes more with the svara of how much someone could afford. And if it's akol lefi amatzif, if someone is hard for him, he says, Ein zetoli magoy derish tashlum kfir mechir mishavim makubel ayos mekach. It doesn't make a difference if the guy is asking for more money than regular. El akol toli im koshloi l'shal menachri aslum shadarish. If it's hard for you to pay, she'az chashav ketiruch likri nachri mutal chal Shabbos matzli. Aish ein zeh kasha. So l'chein magoy derish mechir mufris. He's well to do. This money is not going to make a dent by him. So it's totally in the person. So back to the original shaila with the limousine, it'll be the same thing. Lefi Reb Chaim or lefi this other svara, if it's way more than someone would spend to go to the hospital, I'm not spending $750 to go to the hospital. Is not a normal amount. I don't want a limousine. I don't need a limousine. This is not something I need. And this is way more than the amount that someone would have to pay to go to the hospital. So this is beyond what's considered normal. And Mamela, you don't have to do that. Lefi, what he's saying is no, it matters each person. If someone's not well to do, he doesn't have so much money, and $750 is a lot of money by him, or even $200 is a lot of him. And even if it's the normal amount that people pay for a taxi, but he doesn't have the money, he doesn't take taxis so much. So for him, it'll be mutter to drive yourself. If someone could afford it, so then you can't. If you could afford it, then you have to pay the money yourself. So come out that this halacha of going with a guy to the hospital, these two svaras is a totally what's the normal amount. Anything that's the normal amount you have to pay, or each person has to deal with his own situation, and whatever he could afford, that's what he should pay. But I hope I was Samaras and helped the Oilman understanding the sugya.
Oh yeah, thank you very much, HaRav. Just one pastor that the Oilman has brought up. Would you be able to define a little more sharper the svara that you referenced that Sully uses? We need to do things so time. There shouldn't be a diminution of Pikuach Nefesh. Everybody knows the Moshe Psak that you can go back, otherwise it won't go on the first time. But what's the mitzias when it comes to the psakim and the tzala on this shaila?
What about coming back?
In general, the say that if we have to allow certain things, otherwise it'll create problems in the future. There'll be more sakana in the future.
Okay, it's a little bit of we'll call a hot topic, and there are different opinions about it. And I guess every community or every Hatzalah has to deal with their own members of what's taka going to be. That if they're not going to do certain things, it's taka going to cause loss of love, that they're not going to be fully available. If they're more devoted, then less. If they're less devoted, then you need more. It has to work.
So in other words, it's totally in each specific situation. He has to be aimed the das of his people. Is that what?
I imagine somewhat, there is a ganze machlokes Ramosh and others about Yisuri Diraisa and how much to be over. And I believe there's different atzalas that have different policies about coming back themselves. I know in Lakewood over here, they have goyim that drive back the members from the hospital, if possible, if it's further away, if it's Philadelphia or other places that it's not so pleasant, whatever, it's not so easy to get a goy or it's going to be a long wait time, then they're makel that they could drive back themselves. But they try to have a system set up that goyim should drive them back. I believe in New York, it's not like that. And at least a few years ago, it was like that they drive back themselves. I guess they felt that is what to rely on, and it's too complicated, and it's just going to stir the whole system. If people are going to have to wait a very long time to get driven back.
So one of the hospitals in Brooklyn actually have goyim that go with you and back when they can arrange that. It can be arranged. It can be arranged. If it can't, it can't. So
I guess everyone tries to do the best that they can, but it has to work.